Chodesh Tov, everybody. I wanted to give everybody a message for Rosh Chodesh Elul in light of Parshat Shoftim, which we'll read this coming Shabbos. In Parshat Shoftim, we read about what many consider to be an actual mitzvah to appoint a king. And the Jewish people will come to the land of Israel. The rabbis explain that they have a series of mitzvos. One of them is to appoint a king, and then that king will lead a righteous battle against Amalek, and eventually the Beis HaMikdash completes the triad of those mitzvos, Shalosh mitzvos nitzavu Yisrael, b'shas knisas on the aretz. So here, in this week's parsha, we have the basic set of laws that apply to a king and that govern his administration, including the fact that he shouldn't try to accumulate too much wealth. Of course, whatever wealth he needs to sustain the polity is necessary. Too many horses, again, whatever horses he needs for the army, for national defense, totally legitimate, but not for his own grandeur, his own honor, and also restrictions on his family life so that he should be able to stay on the straight and narrow. If you look at Sefer Melachim in the 11th chapter, you see that even the wisest of all men, Shlomo, was thought that he was somehow above these laws, and what happened is that he was led astray. And the Talmud actually says that's why the Torah, generally speaking, tries not to give the reasons explicitly for mitzvahs, because people say, oh, well, that reason doesn't apply to me, and that reason doesn't apply to me. And that leads us, perhaps, to the most important part of the entire section about the king, and that he's supposed to hold the Sefer Torah with him at all times. We know that there's a mitzvah that's incumbent on every member of the Jewish people to produce a Sefer Torah. The last mitzvah in the Torah, but a king has an additional mitzvah to produce another Sefer Torah, and not just to produce another Sefer Torah, but more importantly, to have it with him at all times. That he's supposed to carry it with him, even to the point where the Talmud discusses what you might otherwise consider somewhat absurd scenarios that he's going to do if he has to, take a shower, etc. But actually these things are discussed because it's taken literally. That'd be a small Sefer Torah to be portable so that he doesn't end up at the orthopedist. But be that as it may, it's a very powerful message. And the Torah says about that one of the impacts that having the Torah with him at all times is to remember who the real king actually is. Levilti rum livavo me'achav, so that he will not grow haughty. Uvilti sura min hamitzvah yaminu smol, and that he won't stray to the right or to the left. Laman yarich yamim al mamachto hu vanav v'kerev Yisrael. And here's the great irony. The more that he realizes that he's not the true king, but that he's an earthly representation, an earthly ambassador, I guess I should say, of the one who's supposed to direct the Jewish people's hearts to the actual king, right? The Melech Malchei Hamlachim, the king that we're going to coronate exactly 1 month from now. The more that he realizes that he's not the actual king, the better chance he has of establishing, securing dynastic rule. Leman yarich yamim al mamlachto hu uvanav bekerev Yisrael, amongst the Jewish people. And this idea of Levilti rum levavo me'achav, that he shouldn't grow haughty, and that he should not grow, as my mother would like to say, too big for his britches. So that, the Ramban says, is the source for the prohibition of arrogance in the Torah. This is the makor for the Isser Ga'ava. And the Ramban says, look, if the king, who could, it'd be somewhat understandable that if the person would think, I have a very important job, I'm responsible for the Jewish people. So if such a person is not allowed to become arrogant, so Ramban says, of course, nobody is allowed to be arrogant. Yes, the Torah was speaking about the king and to the king, but the truth is that we're all prohibited from developing any sense of arrogance. Levilti rum livavo me'achav. As we start the month of Elul, I think we could all appreciate that the gateway to meaningful teshuvah, a prerequisite to even starting the conversation, is an understanding that none of us can afford any degree of arrogance. A person who thinks that he or she has it all figured out is not really a candidate for meaningful teshuvah, for a meaningful return. It's only when we understand that all of us are, in one way or another, and different for all of us, but all of us are works in progress. It's only when we understand that all of us have plenty of things where we need to improve, where we should improve, and hopefully with concerted effort, we will improve. It's only when we understand that process can begin. And that's why we don't try to do it in a day, we don't try to do it in a week, but we give ourselves, and not just a month, but when you add on between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the full 40 days, I think we understand very well that it would be a kind of an arrogance in its own right to think that there's a quick fix out there. But on the contrary, we understand that whatever it is that we're going to isolate and focus on this particular Chodesh Elul, that we do so with the humble spirit and with a sense of determination and courage that we can do this, and we can overcome things that have ensnared us in the past if indeed we're willing to open up our hearts. Levilti rum levavo me'echav, ulevilti sur min ha-mitzvah yaminu smol. The gateway to staying on the path and not to stray to the right or to the left is indeed a humble and a modest spirit. Wishing everybody a Chodesh Tov and a wonderful Shabbos.